Let's see. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. It's such a privilege to fill in for Victor. I am definitely older than Victor. Actually, I'm old enough to be his mom, but we don't need to talk about that. And I love the show. I listen to it or watch it all the time when I'm in the carpool line. And I am delighted that my friend Janessa could join us. Janessa Goldbeck is the Janessa, I don't even have your bio up. Could you remind me of your title?
Yeah, of course. I'm the CEO of Vet Voice Foundation.
Right, that's it. And you work with my husband, Alex, which is how I know you. But I'm a little jealous because I think you're great as well and consider you a friend. And, because the show is really intended to kind of educate younger people about politics and, what's going on in current events. Could you talk to us a little bit about your story? You're formerly in the military, you served in the Marine Corps, and then you got out. Could you tell us just a little bit about what happened?
Well, first of all, it's an honor and privilege to be here with you, Rachel. Obviously, I get to work with your husband every day, but I think you are the cooler Vindman and definitely the funnier one. So
this is recorded for all time.
All posterity. I say that all the time when Alex. So a little bit about me. So I didn't join the Marines until I was 26 years old. I got my start in my career as I studied abroad when I was in college in Africa, specifically in Uganda and Rwanda. And while I was in Rwanda learning about the genocide there and how the country was healing after the genocide, I learned that there was an ongoing genocide in a nearby country of Sudan in a region called Darfur. And it was a real trip to be in a country studying, standing and visiting genocide memorials where the words "never again" were painted on the walls and really emphasized, and knowing that the international community was turning a blind eye to what was happening in Darfur, where hundreds of thousands of people were being displaced and murdered. And so that really didn't sit well with me. I came back to the United States. I was fired up to do something about it. I was a junior in college at the time, and I started organizing on my campus to try to make the U.S. government more aware of the situation. And that led me to become a national student leader in the movement to end the genocide in Darfur, Sudan. So by the time I was graduating from college, our movement had grown to thousands of chapters on colleges and high school campuses nationwide. Not to date myself, but this was right when Facebook and Gmail were coming out. So it was the first time that students could organize across the world and across the country in a really fast, easy way. And so we grew really rapidly. So I decided after college, I would move to DC, do this work professionally. I ended up working as a human rights organizer in Washington, DC for a few years. And that work led me, because we worked specifically on civilian protection in conflict zones, we were often having to coordinate with military entities, whether that was the UN, international peacekeepers, or US troops. And it became very clear to me really early that there weren't a lot of people who spoke both human rights and military speak.
Yeah.
And that lack of ability to communicate would lead to some real gnarly situations. So I decided to go get an extreme master's degree in military speak. I joined the Marines as an officer. And
I have background people and dogs. Sorry. Yeah. It's like,
beautiful background.
Yes,
I mean, it looks like a fake background, but it's
real. That's why we have the people. It's not AI.
I love it. Anyways, long story long, I guess, that led me to the Marines. And so that's what got me into the Marines. I ended up falling in love with the Marine Corps itself. Every institution is flawed, but Marines are a special breed. And as you well know, the military is full of all kinds of people who come from all walks of life and backgrounds. And it's really one of the last places in our society where you get to, stand shoulder to shoulder with and work on things with people who might have a really different worldview than you, but you're all working towards a common cause. And I really loved that about it. So spent a few years in the Marines, and now I get to run this awesome organization that works to lift up the voices of veterans in our political space, and do that with some really amazing people.
So Okay, we'll get more to the other that voice and what you're doing now in a minute, but I want to speak to a little bit about this idea of service. And as you touched on, that I know it and you know it, that the military is a place where a really cross section of the entire nation, and but there's this idea now, and we keep seeing polling, and the military is really trying to figure out how they're going to make their recruiting numbers. In some of although I don't think it's a full picture, but what we hear time and time again is that young people, in particular, don't see the value in military service, or maybe even, I'm not sure the word, I use the word value, but I think what they're saying, they don't see the point of it, just to be blunt. What do you say about the accuracy of that, and maybe how that came to be, and your thoughts on those thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think people have a right to be deeply skeptical about some of the foreign policy decisions that the last few administrations, both Democratic and Republican, have made that have sent our troops into harm's way, and whether or not what the utility of those decisions were. So I do think there's a healthy and valid skepticism for people to say, well, do I want to put my life on the line to go on some foreign policy misadventure? But I also think that is one very small sliver of what the military is. This is something I didn't understand as a civilian until I was actually in the military. But the bulk of what we do is preparation and training, and for a worst case scenario. And that took me all over the world to do a lot of training and preparation with partner nations to learn how they fight. I was a combat engineer officer, which meant I got to build things and blow things up, which was a pretty fun job. And got to do that with NATO troops all over Europe. In fact, my last deployment was I had a platoon in Romania and a platoon in Norway, and we were training with NATO forces in the event that Russia might get a little aggressive in other places that were not inside of Russia.
Prophetic.
And at the time, what's that?
Prophetic.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I mean, at the time, I'll be honest, like a lot of my troops were annoyed that we weren't somewhere else doing something more kinetic. But but now, looking at what's going on in Ukraine, a democracy that is standing up for itself with the help of the U.S. and NATO, that is like, there are good reasons for the U.S. military to be as strong as it is, and there are good reasons to serve outside of some of the bad decisions that have been made by elected officials. And I'm a big believer in service, period. I would love to see a national service sort of initiative that gives folks who want to serve in other ways, whether they want to be teachers or firefighters or nurses or doctors, the ability to have some of the benefits that have fundamentally changed my life. I was able to buy a home in San Diego, which has one of the highest costs of living because of the VA loan, and many of my peers can't. And I think my generation and the generations behind us understand that the economy doesn't work for us anymore the way it worked for our parents and grandparents. And military service allows you to sort of access some of those things that are part of the American dream, but it shouldn't just be relegated to military service, in my opinion. I'd love that expanded.
I love the idea of a national service, and many countries have it with great success. And it also gives an ownership of reminding us, hey, we're all in this together. Particularly in this time of really heightened, divisive political rhetoric, that my contention is a lot of people who even say those ideas don't actually believe them, but it's a means of maintaining power without actually having to solve the very real problems and issues that we have in this nation. But it's a way to get around that, and serving alongside someone who grew up differently than you, who has maybe different religious beliefs, and in a completely different part of the country, you have to find a way to work together. And I think it would benefit everyone. I completely agree with you.
I'm a progressive lesbian woman who was raised Hindu, and I was in the Marines. Talk about being
I love it. And I think there's this idea that it's a bunch of white Southern men, and or people that are only joining because it's their only opportunity to do something. And it's just not true at all. I don't know about you, but I attended naturalization services or ceremonies rather for in the military, and it's just absolutely beautiful. You know, I mean, just these people serving, and similar story to my husband of why he served, you know, to give back to the country that gave him an opportunity, and, you know, so many different reasons. And I think we would benefit from it. But I know, because of your personal story, that you got out of the Marines and moved back to San Diego because, in part, to care for your mom. You know, do you want to talk about that a little bit? What led you back to San Diego, and then what you got involved with then?
Yeah. So my mom was diagnosed with MS when I was about like maybe 2 years into my military career. And that MS advanced pretty rapidly, and then morphed into a dementia diagnosis on top of that. So she was unable to live by herself. And I was really fortunate to have the mentorship of a friend, my senior enlisted advisor, who basically pulled me aside and said, hey, you know, you need to make a change in your life, because your trajectory is that you're going to be deployed all the time. Or I had orders to Quantico where I was going to be an instructor for young lieutenants. And that is, you know, an 18-hour day running around in the woods. And he's like, how are you going to try to take care of your mom doing all that? My mom was in San Diego where I grew up. So I requested something called humanitarian orders. The Marine Corps granted them. So they sent me back to San Diego on active duty orders, but to be on a base here where I could effectively take care of my mom. And that experience, you know, I think I was in my like late 20s when it really hit home that I was gonna, as the only child of a divorced parent who was sick, like gonna need to be the primary caregiver.
Yeah, and that's relatable to a lot of people, I think. Yeah,
it was an eviscerating experience, you know, the navigating our healthcare system, which is really more of an insurance system than a healthcare system.
Yeah,
learning what resources do and don't exist. It was like life-changing. I mean, I was so fortunate to be in a position where I had a job, and my mom had a union pension that helped pay for her care. But, you know, it sort of radicalized me in terms of what our country could be, and what it's, you know, where we have a major set of failings. And so I got a little bit more involved in politics locally. I've always been sort of a policy nerd and love doing policy advocacy work at the federal level, but understanding what our local government can do to support folks like me, or young parents, or anyone who's caring for a sick person in their family. I wanted to get involved and kind of make that system better. So I'm currently a candidate for the San Diego County Board of Supervisors. And, you know, I'm hoping to make a big change there. The county board supervises agencies like HHS. There are 5 supervisors who control a $7 billion budget. So it's really where the rubber meets the road on things that, you know, affect people's daily lives.
And, you know, that's an important thing. And that's something, you know, I kind of came into this world of politics much like you. I mean, I was a military spouse. So the military, we don't really talk about maybe policy, but not politics. And so, you know, kind of thrown into this world like, hey, if I, you know, I have to use my voice, and that's why I do the work I do. And, you know, we have a little bit of a platform because of what happened to us. And, you know, and this is what I've chosen to do in the best way I know how. But I think and through that, you know, I've learned the power of local government, the power of state government, and the effect it has, immediate effect it has on our lives. And have you found, you know, running for office, running for local government to be challenging? I mean, you have this background and a lot of knowledge, but do you think it's something that's accessible to everyone to be able to do something to get involved?
No, I don't. And part of that is some of the internal systems that we like put up. I mean, it's first of all, I mean, I think this is pretty well known at this part, but money in politics is everywhere, and it is without resources, it is incredibly challenging to win, and so or even just to be taken seriously as a candidate, and that I think is really bad for our democracy, because it means that the people who run typically are people who have either resources themselves, or have been in the system for a really long time, or have the time and space to take off work for 6 months or a year and be a candidate.
Right.
And who are we've got a little friend joining us.
Yeah. This is, lots of animals in the
That's
show
our house
today.
hippo. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Um,
how do you not become jaded from that? I mean, how do you take that information and that knowledge and then put your hat in the ring instead of just stepping back like so many do and saying, I'm not going to be part of this. I'm not even going to vote because no matter what I do, it doesn't make a difference. It's just all determined by big money and other people that I can't see. And I don't have the time or energy to spend on this because I think we fault people for that, but I mean, it's a pretty realistic,
realistic.
like,
That's
yeah, I
realistic.
mean, I don't judge people for saying that.
I think there's a couple things we could do internally as Democrats.
Mhm.
So like one instant or one suggestion I have is, primaries are different across every state, but
Yeah.
a lot of times big groups with a lot of resources endorse in primaries. They endorse candidates. And one of the key indicators of an endorsement in a primary is often viability, which means how much money do you have in the bank or do you have money coming in from outside? And I would love to see the Democratic Party adopt a stance of no endorsement till after the primary, because what that does is artificially puts the thumb on the scale of so someone has resources, and now we're going to give them more. Now they're even more likely to win. Whereas if you just stayed out, let people hear from candidates, let them hustle, let them, that doesn't solve the problem of it taking up so much time and energy that somebody who has is a working family member probably doesn't have, but it at least takes that little bit of anti-democratic force off the scale. I mean, obviously getting rid of dark money in politics, all that stuff, I would love to see that. How we get there is a challenge. And I'd also like to see Democrats be more honest with folks about what taking dark money means. Like, I think it's easy as a candidate to say, I'm not going to take any special interest money. But in reality, with the advent of independent expenditures and with Citizens United, and I would really encourage viewers and listeners to really do some research on this. Even if I, as a candidate, say I'm not going to take special interest money, there's nothing stopping a special interest from coming in and spending $250,000, $1 million in ads on my behalf. And I will rationally know who paid for that, And so elected officials, even when they say I'm not taking special interest money, and they might really fundamentally mean it, they are benefiting from its existence. And
absolutely.
I'd like to see Democrats be more honest about that, because it helps us identify where the imbalance in power is. And for folks to be able to say, oh, they took, $100,000 from the oil industry, or they didn't take any money from the oil industry, but the oil industry spent $100,000 on them. Those things are the same, right? And so we should be able to call that out. If we want to see more progressive candidates, we should just be honest about how the system works, so that folks have more information when they pull the trigger on who they vote for.
Yes. And, to the point of people who might be a little bit disillusioned or frustrated, yes. I mean, I'm just going to let you in on a little secret. Alex Vindman's a great guy, but he's not perfect. And I still love him anyway. And it's like marriage is work, relationship is work. I have a daughter also who's not perfect. And I mean, it seems like I'm not perfect either. But it doesn't mean that we're not working towards being better people, that we're not working towards, working together and trying to fix the things that we need to fix in ourselves, in our relationships, in our children, whatever, fill in the blank, but we're working towards it. Stepping back and disengaging because there's parts of it you don't like is not the way we do any other part of our life, at least if we're not healthy, functioning adults or members of society. So we can't do that in politics too. We have to keep working despite the problems and keep trying to make a difference. And I love that you don't have to run for the County Board of Supervisors, but you're doing it. I know, because you see it as also a means of your continuation of service and a constantly evolving, it sounds like, for your whole life, way of service. But isn't that what we all should be, is like always figuring out like how we can make things better? I mean, certainly if we want to make things better, that's what we have to do.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's like what life is all about, is like finding something that needs a problem that needs solving, or something that needs a little elbow grease. And my experience over my whole career, whether it was as a human rights advocate or a Marine or now as a candidate, is that so much good stuff doesn't happen just because people think it's hard. And you don't have to run for office or do the absolute hardest thing in your community to move the ball forward.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
A lot of when I was an organizer, when I was a student organizer, folks, there would always be kids coming to me and say, I'm going to start a nonprofit to address gun violence. Right? Like you always kind of think like, what's the
Mm-hmm.
biggest thing I can do? But in reality, I mean, that's great if you have the resources and know how to do that. But there's also like a ton of ways to get involved with entities that already exist. Volunteering on a campaign is a great way to learn how campaigns work. Volunteering with an organization like Brady, if you're someone who really cares about ending the plague of gun violence in our country, these are great places to plug in. You don't have to invent the whole wheel yourself to make a difference.
Which is comforting. I mean, that's great news for all of us busy people. Janessa, thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you to On the Move and Victor for asking me to do
Victor.
this.
Thanks, Rachel. This is so much fun.
Yeah. All right. Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.